Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Welcome to Conversations with Niki. I'm Niki Seberini. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's really, really lovely to be with you. I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, MC 90.3 FM in Plettenberg Bay, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM, and Bay FM. And just also to remind you to visit the website www.conversationswithniki.co.za, where all the shows, the podcasts of the shows are put onto that website. So if you have missed any of the shows in the past, please do go to that website. They will all be there. And also I'd love to hear from you. So please use the contact bar there on the website and be in touch. Let me know if we're bringing you the shows that you're really enjoying. If you've got any stories that you think would resonate with our listeners, please do send them through. I'll be very happy to have a look at those. Also, you can go to the Facebook page. If you like the Facebook page, that means you get the podcast of the show as well. That's Conversations with Niki. Or you can follow me on Twitter, and the Twitter handle is @Seberini. Of course, Conversations with Niki is the show where you are entertained, informed, and inspired. And I'll never forget, a few years ago, there was a movie that came out. It was called The Bucket List. And it was the first time I heard this concept of the bucket list. So if you had to have a bucket list, if you had to write down a list of things that you want to achieve in this lifetime, sometimes we get so stuck in Groundhog Day, waking up and getting through the day and getting through the job and paying the bills and doing whatever it is that we do, that there are times when we forget about the dreams. We forget about that which sparks us, that which drives us forward and fills us with energy and with delight as well. So on this bucket list, I mean, what would it be? Would it be to travel to a particular place? Would it be to, I don't know, try a different type of food, learn to speak a new language? What would be on your bucket list? And I wonder how many of you would have written there in bold, climb Mount Everest. Well, I have to confess that it certainly wouldn't be on mine, because I don't have the strength of character, I don't have the strength of mind, and I physically I don't have the strength to do something like that. And when I come across someone who has achieved something so momentous, I think to myself, wow, what a story they have to share. So I'm so delighted that we have someone in the studio who's done just that. She has climbed Mount Everest. In fact, on the 19th of May last year, Lee Denhont became the third South African woman to summit Mount Everest, which is the highest mountain on earth. And here she is in the studio with us. So Lee, welcome.
Thank you, Niki. Awesome to be here today and to be sharing our story with your listeners.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. And also for Kim, your twin sister, coming in. Hi, Kim.
Hi.
Thanks for coming in as well and supporting Lee. And so we're going to hear the story from your side as well, which I'm looking forward to. So I have to ask you, Lee, I mean, why?
Why? Well, I mean, you're why not? Why not?
A novice mountain climber. Yes. This isn't something that you do all the time.
Yes. Niki, I'm the personality that likes to challenge myself, and I've always been very involved with sport and great adventures, and I just made a decision in June in 2012. I was wondering what my next big sporting achievement will be, a big challenge would be, and I was sitting on the couch thinking maybe I should attempt Base Camp Everest, and I thought to myself, but why go to base camp when you can go to the top of Everest? And there and then I made this decision that I was going to attempt to summit Mount Everest.
Okay, and once that thought came into your mind, are you crazy? Was it quickly put that thought back where it came from?
No, not at
all. Or was the seed had been planted?
100%, and I made that decision on the Sunday. So what I did is I went to work on the Monday and I got into the internet saying, and I put in there, what does it mean to climb Mount Everest? And I had no idea it was going to take 2 months to climb Mount Everest, and also the huge cost involved, and what it would actually mean to climb that mountain, and also being a novice climber. I'd only climbed one mountain 10 years ago, being Kilimanjaro. So I had set myself a huge challenge.
Sure. So let's just talk about, I mean, you started off and you said you like to challenge yourself and you enjoy sport. What do you do in terms of sporting and challenging yourself before climbing Everest?
Essentially, I'm a runner, but I have done 3 full Ironmans, which involve the 3 disciplines being the running, the swimming, and the cycling, and but predominantly a runner. So I've done a lot of races throughout South Africa, but never mountain climbing, not at all. As I said, 10 years ago, doing one Iron Mountain.
But
Bentley.
Ironman's huge though, Lee.
Yes,
I mean, that's
it's
huge. You've got to
extreme
be
endurance
incredible. Yeah, you've got to be strong for that.
triathlon. Yes.
So I want to know, I mean, where did that strength of character come from? I myself, when I'm pushed too hard, when I reach a point, I go, okay, and I stop. I literally just stop. What is it about you that pushes you further? Were you born that way?
I'm looking at my twin right now. I think we both stepped into the planet being very determined individuals, quite influenced by our mother, very strong mother.
Okay.
And just with a sense to drive and go for the best and never to give up. Never to give up. But making reference to Mount Everest, because it was so hard, I had completely underestimated the climb. I had no idea what I was in for. The extreme temperatures, the night we had summited was minus 35 degrees. The wind chill factor was minus 50. And as a South African, I hadn't prepared myself.
I'm trying to get my
35, yes,
35 degrees.
Yes. And as a South African, I always say, we don't know what cold is. Our temperatures in winter in Johannesburg are up to 21, 22 degrees. So the cold was a really, really big challenge for me. But when I made the decision about climbing Mount Everest, when it came to the front in terms of what it would cost me, in my personal capacity, it cost me 600,000 rand, is why I made the decision that I'd like to do this for a reason and do it for a charity. And in those really dark, challenging moments when I was on that mountain, I think in life, when you question why you're doing something, what's the main objective, besides the fact that your ego kicks in to say, well, you know what, I made it to the top of the world, but to say that people are benefiting and you've raised money and there's a great cause to, behind this and what's motivating you and driving you. In my preparation for Everest, what we had done, worked very closely with my twin and my family, with a group of wonderful children, less privileged children, and they'd all signed the South African flag, and that South African flag I took right to the top of Everest, and it was very special.
Is this
very special.
The Schaumburg community?
Schaumburg community, yes.
So do you think that's important, Lee? Do you think you need to pin something onto a far greater purpose, a far greater reason for doing something?
Absolutely. I think especially if it's something really, really big where there's a lot of sacrifice involved, and there's a lot went into it, and as I said, I completely underestimated it, but it was a big decision in my life to do. It was a big cost involved. A lot of people were supporting me, supporting these children, raising money, and there were just so many reasons to summit. There were so many reasons not to give up. And
at what point did you realize you had underestimated this climb?
In the early days, even walking to base camp, Kim knows, sitting here with base camp took 11 days just to get to base camp, and I struggled with the cold, I struggled with the altitude. Kim was far stronger than me, and I think she was quite concerned at many points, thinking if you're struggling getting to base camp, how on earth are you going to get to the top of Everest? And just underestimated it. And in terms of training cardio on a treadmill is not mountaineering, and not those temperatures. Had never experienced those temperatures in my life.
That extreme cold.
Yeah.
I was saying when I saw the pictures, I mean, we're looking at clear skies, the sun shining. You have no idea how cold it is. Kim, was it just freezing?
No, it was freezing. We were completely unprepared. As I mentioned, the whole thing is arranged by a bunch of Canadians who are used to such extreme temperatures, just on a daily basis. So the South Africans really, really took a lot of strain. But you just carry on going and you just get on with it, It's adapt or die. So.
What's it like being a twin and having your other half, because she is your other half,
yes, she is,
come to you and say, I want to climb a Mount Kilimanjaro? I mean, how do you respond? Do you feel like you have to? Well, you did support her, but do you feel like you almost need to be by her side when achieving something so huge?
Well, look, when she first told me about it, I kind of worked out how many months I've got to convince her otherwise. And then I realized I was losing that battle badly. So I decided, the only thing to do, and that's what we do, is just step into support role, and she's going to do it anyway. So rather, be in or be out. So obviously the option is to be in.
Are you also into sports? Are you also into heavy training?
No, I prefer much lighter stuff.
So I mean, I ask because I love to see where it is in a person's life that they develop these characteristics. I mean, you talk about having a strong mother. That's a huge influence. Lee, you said that Kim is also very determined.
Yes,
Are you determined in a very different way, Kim? I mean, do you have the strong personality, you have the strong will, but do you direct it in a completely different way too?
Yeah, I think we're both incredibly strong in whichever decisions that you make, but we do have different interests. I'm not that into extreme sports, and that really isn't my thing. So, and I think we're just both passionate about just the support for each other and our family. We've got a very close family, so there's just like a lot of love that goes around, and whoever decides to do whatever they want to do, we all just step in and get on with it.
So
you
you've
know.
got a whole team behind you.
Called the
Always.
Dream Team.
The dream,
Yeah.
the dream team. Is the dream team on loan at any time?
24/7. 24/7.
So Lee, once you went out there and you said, okay, this is something I want to do, and now you started investigating. 2 months, I can't believe it, to actually climb Everest. I never knew that until I started researching. I thought that you'd go in, you'd start climbing, and within a couple of days you'd summit Everest. Shows you how ignorant I am. But what were the steps? What did you have to start doing in terms of preparing your mind and your body for Everest?
I started reading books on Everest and speaking to some of the South Africans that had summited. To date, there are only 27 South Africans that have summited Mount Everest. Out of the 27, there are 24 men and 3 women. And I spent time with the second woman who had ever summited, Mandy Ramson. She gave me some advice, as well as a wonderful man, being 63 years old, Tony Hampson-Tyndale. He also helped me, and he advised me on my gear and my kit. And because I was a real novice, I had no idea. What I did is also in the December, before departing for Everest, which is end of March, I spent a few days in Mont Blanc, on the slopes of Mont Blanc, where I had a specialist coach also helping me again with the gear and the equipment and how to manage that. But just every single day doing training, but cardio in a gym.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, Kim says that she tried to dissuade you, but I mean, were people instantly supportive of your decision?
Niki, people were very concerned because obviously the fact of being a novice, and also very scary stories around Everest. You know, a lot of people have lost their lives. In our climbing season for 2013, there were 9 people that died. And it's a dangerous mountain, and a lot of the expedition companies wouldn't take me on. And I went with a Canadian company called Peak Freaks. The other companies wouldn't take me on because it was a novice climber. Obviously, they've got their own reputation to protect. And the Canadian company called Peak Freaks, when I said to them that I'm a novice climber, this is what I'd like to do, they said, absolutely, come. And their words in the email were, we will help you achieve your dreams. And the reason I actually went with Peak Freaks is they had one line on their website, and it said, we have a 100% safety record. They'd never had any fatalities. And I had to work hard to really convince and reassure my family and my friends, people that were concerned about my lack of experience, this really crazy decision to go to this mountain where a lot of people have lost their lives, and there's some really scary stories in the world of mountaineering.
How do you prepare to climb for a mountain, such a mammoth task, with a group of people who live in another country?
Well, can I tell you, that's quite an interesting question, because we were, as I said, it was a Canadian company. The climbers in our group were from all over the world, and the first time we met one another was in Kathmandu. And it's quite interesting in terms of group dynamics, because you know that you've got to really get on with these people that you're going to spend 2 months with. In terms of gender, I was the only woman in a group of 26 men, in terms of climbers, as well as Sherpas and kitchen staff and the big support team. But we developed incredible relationships. I've said before to my family that I felt that I had a group of brothers in the world today.
Big brothers looking after you?
Yes, we just had this vision of one team, one dream. We all had our own reasons to go for the summit, but there were fantastic group dynamics. A lot of the other expedition companies, there were 42 expedition companies on Mount Everest last year for the climbing season, and a lot of them had unsuccessful group dynamics, and that's a big disaster, because when a group splits up, your question is, where does your leader go? And we were really fortunate because we had a really fantastic group with just people getting on and caring for one another and getting one another to the top of the world.
So it didn't feel like it was a disadvantage being the only female?
No, not at all. No, awesome.
Let's talk
people.
about a group dynamic. I mean, what makes a group dynamic work?
The differences. I believe the differences, because if I can tell you, our youngest climber was 24 years old, a guy called Patrick from Canada. He summited today. He's the youngest Canadian ever to have summited the mountain. We had a doctor from Mumbai. We had a New Zealander. We had actually a 72-year-old climber called Tony Lombardo from America. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. He had a back injury which came to life, and so he had to abandon the climb. And it was a big pity, because had he reached the summit, he'd be the oldest American today to have ever summited Mount Everest. So we just had some really wonderful people in our group, and it worked. We had a 45-year-old Australian, a fireman called Kevin from Australia, and he had already summited Mount Everest once in 2011.
Oh, so he had a whole lot of experience.
Yes, and he helped us, with the zillions of questions that we asked him on a daily basis, because the entire group was a group of novices except for him.
Was it instant? Did you all just click? I mean, you said it. You said, but I mean, there weren't any obvious
No.
problems?
No,
or it was,
no,
that is
not at all.
lovely.
I also think it was due to a great leader, a wonderful man from New Zealand called Marty Schmidt, and he just held this group together. You know, he would just pick up our weaknesses, our challenges, and he really was the glue in our group. And we were very fortunate, very blessed.
I mean, when you mentioned you were the only female, I thought, I personally could think of nothing worse, because it's such a, people are going to see it, you're most vulnerable. You're out there, you're exposed, you're climbing, you can't be seen as a man and a woman. You've got to be seen as this team working
As a climber.
together.
Absolutely, yes.
And so that's a lot in your ego and in your personality and getting.
I think,
around
you know,
that.
I think, Nikki, when you're on that mountain and things are, you get back to basics. There's no fancy mirrors. People aren't wearing makeup. They're not wearing dresses. People are in this rugged climbing gear. The conditions are extreme. Everybody steps into survival mode. There's no egos, and we are there for one reason. We want to summit this mountain, and we want to do it caring for one another and helping one another, and we achieved that so successfully. And I was very, very fortunate. Just great people dynamics, and awesome men. Really awesome men.
Oh, it's wonderful. Listen, I've got someone on the phone who, well, if you had listened to him, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, really. And that is Professor Ben Coetzee. He is the program leader for sports science in the School for Biokinetics, Recreation and Sports Science at High Performance Institute of Sports in Potchefstroom. I've got him on the phone because I know that you went to visit him. Did you have to do something like this? Did you have to see him and get the little tick or get the letter of approval to say, yes, you can climb Everest?
I didn't need to get confirmation or approval from Ben, but it was very interesting because Ben, awesome individual, just took me through various tests on various apparatus with an oxygen mask, and I spent quite a bit of time with him at the High Performance Center, and at the end of the day he did an honest assessment of me, and
So this assessment was to see if he felt you were ready, or if you could, if you had it.
Yes.
Okay, so hi, Professor. Thanks for joining us.
That's a big pleasure.
So, Professor, I mean, it's so lovely having Lee, and Lee said that she hasn't seen you since that first time she had met you. Tell us about that assessment. What's involved?
It was a wide range of assessments. We looked at body composition. You're probably well aware that you lose quite a bit of body mass when you go up, so we had to have a look at muscle mass and a fat percentage especially, just to make sure. Lee was very lean, so it is worrying. The statistics tell us that you lose up to 10 kilograms during a climb, so we had to look at that. And then we did endurance tests, just to see how her body adapts to climbing, especially looking at climbing. And then together with that, we also had a few, I did a few evaluations just to look at her strength, her flexibility, to see how good it is for a climb. And especially if you look at the different muscles that are involved, the demands of climbing, and especially in the position that you're going to be. So that's basically what it entailed.
And did you know that, I mean, she had completed 3 Ironman competitions? So, I mean, there was a pretty fit woman.
We spoke a bit about her background, so I knew she had a very good endurance background. Yes, I was aware of that.
So, Professor, what was your assessment after doing all of these tests?
Her results wasn't bad at all. I wouldn't say that. I think what was worrying for me is the period that we had, or that I felt we needed to conditioning her better for what is involved with a climb. Look, she was very used to running, but to climb is totally a different thing. I think one of the main things is I had to make a realistic assessment with everything that's involved, and the time period for preparation, according to me, was quite short. If you look at most of the people that do climbs, their preparation period in terms of their conditioning is usually anything between 6 months and a year. So I think that was probably one of the main reasons for me making comments like that.
So you told her that she should probably postpone the climb.
I think we didn't really have a direct conversation. Look, I had a TV interview at that stage, and that's why I made a comment.
Okay.
I think you must just remember, when you broadcast something like this to a wider population, I don't think it would be responsible for me to say, listen, you can climb after a short period. I mean, I need to consider people are listening to you at that stage. So that's another factor that I think we just need to look at. It's not that I didn't have any confidence in Lee. I think it's amazing what she did. I mean, without question.
Yeah.
And I think she's also an individual that gave herself the opportunity, and mentally, I think that's the big point we need to state. We didn't evaluate her mentally at all. I think you just need to have a look at that part as well, because at the end of the day, that is a very big part of being a successful climber, or being able to do something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that I wanted to ask you was, from a mental perspective, the strength of the mind. I always keep quoting Professor Tim Noakes, because I'll never forget talking to him, and he was so insistent on what an important role the mind plays. It was just before the Olympics, and he really said that so many of the people taking part, these athletes taking part in the Olympics, if their mental strength is in order, they have a much greater chance at success. So I want to ask you, Lee, I mean, when at that point, I mean, so you'd been told that you needed more time to prepare. That's really what it boiled down to. You needed to spend a lot more time training. How did you feel about that? Did you feel that you should perhaps delay the summit?
I thought many times I thought a lot about the day that I spent with Ben, and what overrode it for me is the people that I'd spoken to who had summited, the South African woman, the second woman, as well as Tony, who had almost also summited, as well as Sibusiso Balani, and speaking to them about just what really, really happened on that mountain, and also speaking to them about my experience, my lack of experience, and them saying, you know what, we really believe that you can do it. I kind of held more onto that, and just knowing my personality, knowing the endurance training that I'd done, and just that I was up for the challenge, and I think I'm also quite impatient. The thought of having to put it off for another year, I wanted to do it, and I'd set my goal to do it in 2013, and
didn't want to lose interest, I suppose.
Not at all. No.
So those moments when you said that you felt that you were unprepared, because that's what you said. You said, as you got to base camp, you realized, gosh, the cold, and am I fit enough, and all of those things. Did you think of the professor? Did you think
I did.
Maybe I should.
I did think of him fondly in a very warm potch as I was on a very, very cold mountain. Absolutely. I realized, and I said this very openly, is that I completely underestimated Mount Everest. I really, really did. And on a daily basis, I was reminded that I was a novice out there, and many times, it was, especially the altitudes and the heights, going those heights was the first time ever in my life that, as going up that mountain, going to those heights, had never done that before.
Never experienced anything
and the cold.
Like that.
Our very first night at base camp was minus 21 degrees. Very first night, and we still need to spend another 6 weeks. Base camp is situated on a glacier. So.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of a cold Joburg night, minus 1 degrees, and we're all, we just can't cope with it. Minus 21. Is that what you said, 21?
21.
Wow. Professor, when you heard that Lee had summited Everest, how did you feel? Did you have this wonderful sense of pride?
I was grateful and relieved, I think. No, look, I felt part of it. I was also taking responsibility in terms of, for me, it was about her life, to be quite honest. For me, it was her life was more important for me than the summit.
Yeah.
So I think we need to maybe say that. And then the point you just spoke about is when you go to altitudes like she did, it's very difficult to know what your body is going to do. And I think when I spoke to her and she told me that her climbing experience, we couldn't really say out of her climbing experience that she had an idea what her body is going to react like. And I think that was also a concern and something it's difficult to prepare someone for.
How does one's body react to this extreme altitude?
Well, there's quite a few reactions. I think one of the main reactions that causes problems is your breathing pattern suddenly changes because you start to hyperventilate. That's one of the first adaptations that your body goes through to try and compensate for the low levels of oxygen. And then the other thing that's also very important is you suddenly struggle to sleep, you feel dizzy, you get headaches, you struggle to eat, you don't really have an appetite. So that also causes problems because you want to try and maintain your body mass or weight, and then you don't really have an appetite to eat because of you also start to get nauseous, and it depends from person to person how that reaction is going to be. So that's just some of the symptoms that you experience, and as far as I remember, the first part of Lee's journey was quite hard. Hard in terms of that, probably also because of some of these symptoms. And if you haven't experienced it before, it's mentally, I think it's very difficult.
So because I mean, is it something that you could get used to? If you're an experienced climber, for example, does the body get more used to this change in altitude?
Well, the one important point, it seems, that the literature and research speaks about as well, is that people who stay in higher altitude environments, their bodies are usually more adept. Okay, that is a very important point. And then the other important point is you'll see that for them to summit, it takes them quite a while to get to the summit because of the time period that it takes for the body to adapt to the new altitude. I think that's one thing I must also maybe focus on a bit or accentuate is fatigue is a very important part of the danger of summiting. A lot of times we push our body, someone like Lee who's mentally very strong, and that happens often, that you push your body past its limits, and that's the dangerous thing also about summiting Everest.
Lee, let me ask you, I mean, when we talk about the altitude, and we'll talk about the fatigue in a moment, but what were your symptoms? I mean, how did you respond?
In terms of weight loss, I lost 4 kilograms. One of the other climbers in my group lost up to 11 kilograms. Fatigue, Ben, is spot on. If I can tell you, the night we summited, we were at Camp 4, which is also known as the Death Zone. It is at a height of 8,000 meters, which is 8 kilometers. And to the summit of Mount Everest is an additional 848 meters. And if you think about it, it's less than a kilometer. 848 meters should essentially take you, 10 minutes, not even to walk.
Right up, yes.
And right up. And that took me, to do 848 meters, it took me 14 hours. 14 hours to get to the summit, of which we spent 20 minutes, 25 minutes taking photographs.
14 hours?
Yes, 14 hours. And I do a motivational talk called Be Inspired, and I always tell the audiences is that it took 14 hours to do 848 meters. And if you think of the Comrades Marathon, which is 90 kilometers, and people do that up to 12 hours, it took me an additional 2 hours to summit the mountain. We spent about 20 minutes on top, took out that South African flag, and took the photographs, and then getting back down, again, another 848 meters took 9 hours. So all in all to the summit.
23 hours?
Yeah.
From Camp 4.
That's correct.
Up 20 minutes and then down.
That's
20, so there's the fatigue.
So what Ben is saying, he is completely spot on with altitude and the fatigue. It's extreme. And also because your body is so out of its zone, you feel as though you're wanting to sleep all the time, but yet you've got to keep moving. And because of the cold, it's imperative to keep moving.
So what's happening? Are you just walking a lot slower? Are you stopping a lot? Are you supporting one another? Why I mean, you're talking about fatigue and you're talking about altitude, but so what's actually happening it's taking so long to get up there?
Well, first of all, there's also just one rope. So every single climber is on one rope. All right. On the 19th of May, 2013, there were 150 people that summited, so that mountain was very, very busy. And it's a slow process. You're constantly moving, but at an exceptionally slow pace.
Professor, we're going to say goodbye to you in a moment, but just very quickly, for anyone who's listening right now who wants to get involved in some kind of challenge, whether it's something as huge as Everest, if it's Kilimanjaro, if it's anything, have you got any points that perhaps they should be aware of before doing something like that?
Well, I think what Lee did, which is very positive, that she surrounded her with people who had experience in climbing. For me, that's the main thing. I think you must surround yourself with people that went through the whole experience, that went through the training, that went through all the trouble, that have experience of things that you can experience on the summit and before your whole preparation process. I think another important point to consider is where you came from. Lee came out of a background of endurance training, but a lot of people don't have that. So for me, that's a good starting point to say, what do you need? You need a very good base. Now, if you read through what everyone says, you don't need to be a elite athletes, but there's a certain amount of physiological endurance capacity that you need to have to make it easier for yourself. And then I think another thing is you must have an aim, something to strive for. Lee had that. She had something that she was looking. She didn't really, a part of it she did for herself, but at the end of the day it was about other people. So I think that's something mentally that also pulls you through, because you have, I won't say a burden, maybe a responsibility.
A purpose, a
Yes.
greater purpose.
So for me, that is probably one of the main things. If you have this purpose, it makes it easier when it's hard. Because there's a lot of people that's dependent on your summit. For her, that was also one of the primary reasons for her doing it.
Absolutely. Professor, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your part of the story as well. It's been great having you on the show.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Ben Coetzee here for you on Conversations with Niki. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Svea Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Well, welcome. It's Conversations with Niki. It's lovely to have you listening today. I'm Niki Seberini, and I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Bay FM, it's Wild Coast FM, Knysna FM, MC 90.3 FM in Plettenberg Bay, West Coast FM, Kawi FM, High FM, and Eldo's FM. And this is the station, the show where, you're entertained, informed and inspired. And I would say that you're definitely inspired today, because to summit Everest, to go through that amount of physical training, to have to apply your mind, to find a greater purpose, it's a place where I think very few of us can actually go to. I for one admire anyone who can go and push themselves that far, and for a much greater purpose as well. So I hope that you are being inspired by Lee Denhont's story of summiting Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro was a walk in the park for you, Lee, when you look back. Summiting Everest last year on the 19th of May, that was 2013. So we've spoken about the naysayers. We've spoken about those people who thought, well, maybe it wasn't a good idea. You really wanting to do it and having this greater purpose. We were talking about this community. I know that you're very passionate about child-headed households, and that is the Schaumburg community. So before we go on with the story, this fascinating story of climbing Everest, how did you get in touch with this community, and why did they strike such a chord within you that you would be motivated to do something like this?
Great question. When I made the decision about Everest, and most importantly when it came to the fore as to what this was going to cost, I thought, I've got to do this for something bigger than simply making it to the top of the world. And I was chatting to a friend of mine, Kate, and I said, Kate, I feel strongly about doing this for a charity, but I'm not really sure which charity. And I thought, I'm going to the highest point in the world. Who is the poorest of the poor? And Kate said to me, have you ever thought about children heading up households, child-headed households? Had never heard that term before, and it's exactly what it is, Niki. It's children as young as the age of 13, 14, 15 that have lost their parents, that are taking care of their younger siblings. What happened in November 2012, I went out with some social workers and started to meet some of these children. And I'll never forget meeting a little boy who was 13 years old, taking care of his 8-year-old sister, no parents. And I said to Sylvia, the social worker, I said, Sylvia, but who's taking care of these children? And she said, Lee, whoever will be kind to them. And that's when I decided that the money that we would raise would be directed towards the Schaumburg community and to better their lives. And so we've just taken it just a step further and further in terms of raising monies, getting a piece of property right in the Schaumburg community. It's 9.2 hectares in terms of size, and it's called the Field of Dreams. And our big intention is to build a children's centre. So we are still working hard to raise the money. And
have you bought the land yet?
Yes,
You've
yes,
bought the
yes,
land.
yes.
I mean, I've seen the plans for it and all
Yes.
with the growing, the vegetable
Yes,
gardens,
yes.
and I mean, it looks
Yeah,
quite.
yeah. We've got a very
magnificent.
big vision. I'm not doing this on my own. I'm doing this with my family. They're completely involved in that. And the medium in which we're going to raise the awareness and raise the monies is in August, September. We're doing something that's called Summit South Africa, and we are attempting to summit 10 mountains, 9 of them being the highest peaks in the 9 provinces, and the 10th mountain is Table Mountain, being the mountain of significance, the mother mountain, because the children don't have mothers. And we're going to be appealing to 9 corporates, 9 companies, to each sponsor a peak. And we're going to take the same flag that went to the top of the world, went to Everest, that was signed by the children, and we're going to take that flag to the top of 10 mountains, and the initiative is called Summit South Africa, one peak at a time.
That is fantastic. Are some of the kids going to be climbing with you?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
Okay.
We are inviting South Africa to come and summit these mountains with us. Definitely.
So when are you going to be starting?
In August and September.
August and
Yes,
September.
yes.
And then hopefully funds raised will go to setting up
The Field of Dreams.
Field of
That's
Dreams.
it, to build the Children's Centre on Field of Dreams.
So you started off, you know, you love these extreme sports. You sat down, you thought, what's my next challenge? You thought Everest. And in fact, not only have you done something which is so huge, but it's opened up a whole different area of your life.
Absolutely.
You've literally turned a corner, and everything's changed for you.
Absolutely. I really believe, Niki, that it's so easy in life not to do something. It's so easy to say no. It's so easy to lead an ordinary life. And then when you make that change, and when you say, you know what, I'm going to do something, I'm going to embrace it, and there's positive results, it keeps going. The momentum continues and the journey keeps going, and to do something for a reason and a cause makes the difference. It makes it all worthwhile. I've got something in my office, and I read it just before coming. It said, nothing worth having comes easily in your life. And it's so true.
How will you manage your day job and changing people's lives at the same time?
I have an incredibly awesome team. I have a really, really awesome team, and when I stepped out of the business last year for 2 months, I got into that mountain. I switched my phone off because I knew I had a massive mountain to embrace, and my team ran like clockwork, and I'm very blessed. I've been running my business for 14 years, and so the journey continues, and my team continues on their side, and so we continue to climb mountains and raise money.
Has it been easy for you to handle, take that control and just hand it over to other people? Was that a growth point for you?
There was another mini Everest that I needed to, but it was also a big
All
lesson
part
to
of this
trust.
journey,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
to trust. To step out of an area of your life where all you know is hands-on control. To say, you know what, I'm actually going to trust this, and I did. For 2 months, I stepped out of my business, and I came back, and everything had gone phenomenally well. So just great.
Well,
great.
it's just interesting how it was the beginning of the change for you.
Yes.
Because if you hadn't been able to do it, we wouldn't be having the discussion about summiting the 10 mountains.
Yes,
and then
Summit South Africa.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly. That's
yes.
great.
Yeah.
So, Kim, I mean, you're sitting here and you're nodding and you're very proud. And let's hear it from your perspective. So how involved were you in preparing Lee? Because you've heard from the professor. The professor felt, she runs well. She's very strong. She's lean. For me, that would have been the best news ever. I would have gone out and just eaten and ensured that I had managed to make a bit before climbing. But anyway, seriously, and that he felt that she should perhaps postpone it, but she wanted to go ahead. So how were you involved in terms of that? Were you helping more from a mental aspect, from a physical perspective?
Yeah,
Where
look, you
were
can't really help Lee with her physical training because all she does is run.
Okay.
So you can suggest that she does this and more core work and stuff, but she doesn't listen, so you just back off and let her do that. My biggest concern really was her body weight. For me, she was very underweight, but knowing that all those climbers, even the people just going to base camp, you drop quite a few Ks because your metabolism speeds up so hectically the higher you go. So that was my biggest concern with Lee. So it wasn't about her mental state of being. I knew how strong she is and her determination and her strong will. She'd get up that mountain. I was a bit concerned by the time we got to base camp and you had really been struggling. That was it was a panic-stricken moment for me.
Because you were there.
Yeah.
You went to, you supported her all the way, you got to base camp. So when she was struggling, were the warning bells ringing? Were you thinking, this is my responsibility to get off? Because Everest is not a joke. Many people have lost their lives.
Absolutely.
No, it's not something you decide, oh, well, I'm just going to turn back and,
No, leaving Lee, I mean, I had to say goodbye to her and leave her at base camp. It was, I think, to date, the worst day of my life. It was really, it was awful for me. But what I did do behind Lee's back that she didn't know about at the time is that I went to like the leader of the climbers and, you know, all the people involved that were staying behind and all the boys that were climbing with her, and I had a long chat with each and every one of them. describing, yeah. I was just explaining that Lee's so strong-willed and so incredibly stubborn, you know, which makes her so determined. But at the end of the day, you don't realize, and you can't pretend like you're feeling okay when you're not feeling okay, because with altitude sickness, I mean, your brain starts to swell. There's nothing you can do. If no one knows about it, you've got to get down that mountain as fast as possible. Otherwise, it's over. So it's just really speaking to those people about her character and the type of person she is. You know, Lee can practically have a brain hemorrhage, and you know,
she'll keep
like
going,
stare at a panado like it's, you know, just can't take it.
Wow.
So that was all I could really do, but it was really an awful moment leaving her there. It was traumatic.
When she turned and she walked, that was a hard one for you.
It was just awful. No, I cried all the way down back to Kathmandu.
Yeah. And for you, Lee, did you feel that? Were you connected?
Yes,
did you realize that she was very concerned?
Yes, definitely. We are really, really fortunate. We've got an incredible relationship. We're unbelievably close. Mountains or no mountains, we have been all our lives been very, very close. And it was really awesome for me that Kim was on this journey with me, you know, traveling to Kathmandu, doing base camp, and it was really awesome that she also had a window to my world in terms of who I was going to be spending the next 2 months with, the climbers, the leaders of the expedition, the Sherpas, and that was really, really awesome. But it was a hard moment to say goodbye. It really was. I think when Kim left, and my partner was also with me at the time when they left to say goodbye, I felt quite alone, but it also helped me just to focus now on the reason why I was there without any emotional attachments, you know, and to really focus on...
Do the job. Do the job.
Do the job.
Yes. We spoke about being slightly underweight. What do? I mean, you're carrying a backpack, and it takes 2 months to summit this thing, this mountain. How do you carry enough food for 2 months on your back? How does that work?
Well, we've got a big team. I had a personal Sherpa. Now, a Sherpa is somebody who's from Nepal. They're used to the extreme temperatures as well as the altitudes, and he assisted, all right. I carried my own backpack, but he would assist in terms of carrying food. And also at base camp, we predominantly spend time at base camp, because what happens in preparation, that's why it takes as long as 2 months, because your body has got to adapt to the altitude. So what would happen, you'd spend days at base camp, and then you go to camp 1, spend 1 night, camp 2 another night, camp 3 another night, and you go all the way down, spend a few days at base camp, and you do that a few times. It's called rotations. So by the time you get to your summit window, your body is completely used to and is adjusted to the altitude.
So that's why it takes so long.
That's why it takes so long, absolutely. And then what happens is that our expedition company is fed weather reports from France, from Sweden, from Canada and Australia, telling the expedition companies when is the perfect weather window. For our climbing season last year in May, we had incredibly high winds on Everest, so the climbing windows were very limited, and we got the date of being the 19th of May. So what happens, you leave base camp on the 12th of May, and you start going up the 1 night at camp 1, 1 night at camp 2, 1 night at camp 3, slowly making your way up, and then you're in camp 4, which is the death zone, and you go for the summit and you make your way down. So from leaving base camp on the 12th of May, we summited on the 19th, and we were back 2 days later.
Okay, so there's food at base camp.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
But you don't go short of eating. I made
what kind
sure
of food are you eating?
At base camp, you're eating meats, you're eating starches, breads, very, very normal food. But the higher you go, it's soups, and because you take a little gas burner up, you don't have water, so you take the snow, you melt the snow, and you boil that in terms of water, and then you start melting your food.
Because you need energy, you need that fuel in your food.
Absolutely, yeah. So we joke and we say Everest is a very expensive weight loss program.
Come down 10 kilos, 5 kilos.
Yeah.
And in terms of going to the loo, I mean, I have to ask this question. I think about these things.
I've got to tell you, that's when I really felt that I was the only woman with 26 men, because it was so much easier for them.
Because you didn't have a tree.
No.
You didn't want to walk round the mountain for privacy. I think about these things.
And I've got to tell you, I mean, ablution facilities are very limited. You don't bath, you don't shower. You rely heavily on wet wipes, or those Johnson's Baby's wet wipes from a hygiene perspective. I've got I didn't bath for 2 months. And when I got back to South Africa, somebody said, wasn't it a strange feeling when you got into a bath for the first time? I said, no, I got more of a fright when I saw my legs that I hadn't shaven for 2 months. That was not a great feeling.
It was cold
Exactly.
and you were so welcome.
Exactly. So
I mean, things like brushing your teeth and,
Yeah.
it's just basics, really.
it's back to basics. Absolutely. Very simplistic life up there for an 8-week period.
When you get from Camp 1 to Camp 2 to Camp 3 to Camp 4, the tents are already set up there.
Yes.
So
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So are you carrying a sleeping bag with you?
Yes,
Or they all-
yes.
okay.
No. We carried our oxygen. All right, from Camp 3, you're on oxygen, so you've got an oxygen tank in your backpack, as well as your sleeping gear and your energy bars and your sweets you're taking up with you, and any additional clothing that you need.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you'd wake up in the morning. What would you just sleep in, really? What you were climbing in until if you had to change?
Oh, they ever
or
change
if you-
clothes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at this stage, Kim, I mean, were you every time she came back to base camp? Were you in touch? Was there communication happening?
Yeah, that was
How were you kept in the loop?
well. There was a blog, and then Peak Freaks, they would get word back from base camp, and then let people know what was going on. But communication was quite scarce. So it was very difficult, so you're very stressed, especially when you know that they're now heading out again and they're going through the icefall, because it's so incredibly dangerous. I mean, even when we were at base camp, one of the Sherpas died.
Really?
On the icefall. So it's, it's so stressful, and that lack of communication. But the worst thing is when you guys actually left for the summit. It was the 12th of May, and it was Mother's Day. And the whole family was together, and I was determined to get hold of Lee. So we finally got hold of her. And knowing that was the last time we would actually be able to speak to her
For 10 days.
until she had summited and got back to base camp. So that was so stressful, so emotional, it was terrible. And also in that time, the snippets of information were really,
Very
really limited. And even the night of the summit, we expected you to summit between Hoppers 2, Hoppers 3, around there. And we were told we should have news by that stage. By Hoppers 5 in the morning, we hadn't heard a thing. I was so beside myself. And we finally got the call at 6:15.
And
Sure.
when you got that call?
Oh, no, it was just all full down. It was just, so relieved.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow.
Now,
Okay.
we were even happier when Lee did get back and told us that she'd given away all her camping gear. So she wouldn't do it again.
Forever the philanthropist.
Yeah.
So these crevices that you have to cross, I mean, these are huge
crevices.
crevices,
Yeah.
and there's like a flimsy little bridge which
Yes.
connects.
With the ladders going across. It's known as the Kumbu Icefall. That is the most dangerous part of the climb. We had 3 people that lost their lives in the Kumbu Icefall, because what happens there...
What do you mean you had?
We had in our
People
in the
in
group
your-
of no, not with our expedition
Yes.
group in Peak Freeze, but in
That
our
group going
climbing
up at
season,
the-
there were
oh,
600 climbers, 480 people summited last year, and we had 9 deaths. 3 of the deaths were in the Kumbu Icefall, where climbers were walking across the ladders and actually fell off into the crevices.
How do you fall off the ladder?
People losing balances. If you think about
Slippery?
it, not very slippery, but you're wearing very heavy boots. My boots with the crampons weighed 3.8 kilograms, nearly 4 kilograms of footwear that you're wearing. You've got a pack on your back, which is 10 kilograms. And just, the only thing getting you across those ladders is a rope on either side. So you've got to work very carefully. And 3 people unfortunately lost balances and fell off the ladders to their death.
That is really shocking.
It's radical.
What went through your mind before you
I was just
climbed onto the
reminded
bridge?
how dangerous this mountain is, and to really, really respect the mountain. There's a wonderful saying that it says, nobody conquers Mount Everest. She simply allows you to summit her. And you've got to respect that
I think
mountain. You
so.
really, really do. Not just as a novice climber, you can be the most experienced climber, but you've got to respect the dangers, the weather, the very high winds that came up. So we had very, very tight weather windows, but you've got to respect that environment. It is magnificent. Really, really
Are you
special
holding
place.
a rope the whole way up? The whole way up,
Yes.
so there is this rope.
Yes, one rope.
Was there, you talk about these winds, was there ever a time when you couldn't see very well in front
Yes,
of you?
yes, we went through a windstorm from Camp 2 to Camp 3, and that was quite radical from a visibility point of view, because we couldn't see.
And Lee, were there times when you thought, I don't think I can do this, I don't think I can make it?
Yes, when Niki was not going up, summited, which took 14 hours, but there's that expression, whatever goes up has now got to come down. And so you get to that moment, I had the flag out, took the photographs, and now what was 848 meters had taken me 14 hours to get up. Was going down was unbelievably hard. Another 9 hours to get to that tent, and just the level of exhaustion was extreme.
Which do you think
Extreme.
took its toll more on your body, the
Coming down.
descent or ascent?
Yeah.
Descending.
More people die coming down than going up. And very interesting, if you summit Mount Everest but you don't make it down, they don't count it as a summit. You have to go both ways.
That's not fair.
Yeah. It's just the way it is.
And
Yes.
let's talk about people dying on Everest, because you hear some terrible stories. I've even seen pictures of people,
Yeah,
just
the dead
walking
bodies.
past and
Yeah.
they're dead. Did you come
Yeah.
across any dead bodies?
Fortunately, we didn't. We were warned by
Thank goodness.
expedition leaders that please don't be oversensitive because there are dead bodies on the mountain. I was very fortunate I didn't see, but there are known to be a lot of dead bodies.
And that's the agreement, that if something happens to you, you've got to think for yourself.
Absolutely.
Even
Each
though you're
man
very
to
much
his
in
own.
this expedition,
Yes.
and you spoke about the fact that you're all working together, if something happens to you, they've got to think of themselves. They've got to carry on.
100%. I went with the false illusion that I had this personal Sherpa, thinking he's going to guide me, train me, lead me, push me, pull me. And then you realize very, very quickly is that you've got to do it one step at a time on your own. I carried my own backpack, my own oxygen, and his English was very limited. So not the disappointment, but I quickly realized if this is to be, it's completely up to me.
You're on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And for every single climber, novice or experienced, you're doing that mountain on your own. It's one rope which gets every climber up, and that same rope gets every climber down.
Let's talk about the cold, because we've spoken about the minus 21, the minus
Yes.
35 degrees. I don't think we can get our head around how cold, but it can be incredibly depressing being in that state where you're so cold. There's no escape. There's no warming up. How do you get around something like that? Is there something that you can do to relieve yourself, to get some respite
For
from
me,
the
it
cold?
was completely mind over matter. I had no idea how cold it was going to be. Our very first night at base camp, being minus 21 degrees, was a huge reality check. Base camp is based on a glacier, as I was saying, and I used to wake up every morning saying, Lee, manage the cold, don't let the cold manage you. Lee, manage the cold, don't let the cold manage you. Because I realized, Niki, if I was not going to get on top of this cold management, I should have let that mountain there and then, because the higher you go, the colder it gets. So it was it was probably one of my greatest challenges, to learn what gear to wear, when to wear it. One of the big challenges on Everest, every single day we had helicopter rescues, and there was also frostbite, people losing fingers and toes. So if you don't get on top of how you're wearing your gear, your specialist gear, and you don't stop managing that cold, you have the challenge or the fear of your extremities. So
You didn't suffer from frostbite at all?
no, I was very fortunate. Again, with the guidance of our leader. The one morning I was in the Kumbu icefall and I couldn't feel 3 of my right toes. I had 3 pairs of socks on, I had 3 pairs of gloves on, and our leader, Marty, I said, Marty, I can't feel my 3 toes. And that's always a panic. If you can't feel something, something's not right. And he looked at me, he said, Lee, you're not dressing correctly. I said, what do you mean? I've got 3 pairs of socks on, I've got 3 pairs of gloves. He said, no, you've got to make sure your core is warm. You've got to layer up here, because if your core and your organs are warm, your extremities will be warm. And that's why I think being on that mountain for so long, by the time you go for your summit, you know what gear to wear, you know what gear not to wear, you know about how to handle your equipment properly. So we had a great leader just teaching us, especially being a group of novices, especially being a South African, not knowing these extreme temperatures, or ever wearing a down suit. A down suit was the suit that I wore, which protects your body from temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees. You're not going to wear it for any other reason than when you're in those temperatures.
Wow. Do you sweat?
You do.
And
Yes,
that,
you
I
do.
suppose, is
Yes, you
dangerous.
do, because you're also doing physical exercise. Yeah, so in the same clothing, it wasn't pretty.
Well, no.
Size.
No, but I mean, if you sweat, then you've got to be careful that,
Yes, absolutely, and that's why
the
so
water that
it's
you've released
That's
isn't
correct.
going to freeze.
It's imperative that you learn to know your gear and when to wear it, and how to still be able to be mobile in the gear that you're wearing, because you can't just simply layer up and layer up and layer up, because you're going to get hot. And also mobility.
So you had this 14-hour climb, which I cannot get my head around, from Camp 4 to summiting Everest, 14 hours. But when you climbed up, and I'm sure everyone has asked you, what went through your mind? Was there something that went through your mind?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I had the South African flag for 2 months, and I had visualized this moment of standing on top of the world with this flag in my hands. But more important than that was just thinking the love and the support that I had from so many people, especially my family. I felt that I was standing on top of the world, and they were all right there with me, and the children that had signed the flag. There were so many reasons to be to do it, to summit. It was just never ever an option for me to say, I'm not going to do this, or I'm going to fail at this. I knew that if there was all the things within my control to get there, I would do it. If there was something beyond my control, like an avalanche or a snowstorm or a weather window which would not permit the climbers to get there, I had no reason but to go for the summit.
So you achieved your dream.
100%.
And while you started walking down, were you focusing on, I did it, fantastic, or was your mind already projecting ahead and thinking, now what's next?
No, I was definitely not thinking about what was next. I was thinking about getting back to that tent at Camp 4 and just getting through the exhaustion and just focusing because on one foot in front of the other, just being really, really tired, you know, and holding onto this rope and thinking, I got up here now and I've got to get down. And just also very aware of how long it would take me to get up. And yeah, it was very daunting, very, very daunting. So I wasn't thinking about my next goal, my next challenge. I was just thinking about
getting safely
survival
down.
mode. Yeah. Yeah.
You've pushed yourself incredibly far. What have you learned about yourself? What do you think? I mean, we can talk about challenges. You spoke about the cold and the exhaustion and the altitude. But what have you learned the most, really, about yourself? I mean, you had to spend a lot of time in that mind of yours.
Absolutely, and yeah, and a lot of quiet time, quiet time, because with an oxygen mask on your face, you're not speaking to anybody. And
there's no distraction.
No, you're right. It's this magnificent surrounds of the Himalayas and being as high, it's so high that you're at this point where you can actually see the curvature of the earth. But what I think the greatest lesson is to realize, and it may sound cliched because so many people talk about nothing being impossible, and I think the only thing that limits us is ourselves. Our mind is the greatest block. And I think, you know, when you develop a reason and a cause and a purpose to do something, it makes it so much easier to push through and think, I'm actually doing this because of X, Y, and Z, not because of me and my ego of saying, you know what, I'm going to stand on top of the world. And just to push through, to never ever give up. And as I was saying, you know, nothing in life worth having comes easy, you know, not at all. So
yes,
I want to say is that Everest was the hardest thing I've ever done, and at the same time it's been my greatest gift.
Your greatest gift.
My greatest gift.
How many people turn around? I've heard people who've really experienced hardship and they turn around and say it was a gift.
Yeah. Yeah,
and you stretch, you
absolutely,
learn. How far can you go?
And Niki, my journey continues where I've spoken to over 6,000, 7,000 school children. I've spoken to many corporates as my talk be inspired about climbing your own Everest. And that's not about a mountain at minus 21 degrees, you know, about just achieving and pushing through.
When you came back to South Africa and so much had changed in your world and you got off the aeroplane and everything was exactly the same, that's got to be disappointing. Didn't you almost expect things to be different when you returned? Because so much had changed in you.
No,
so much had shifted.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I don't think there wasn't disappointment, but one thing that for me I realized very quickly is that you can't change things in life, but you can change your own position in your life. And it's been so great when I could take myself out of my life zone of what I was running my business, doing what I do every single day, to say, take 8 weeks out of your life to do something different, which is going to change your life forever. And that's what it is. It's about creating those windows of opportunity. Step out of that hamster on a wheel mode. Go and do something differently. And it's not about 2 months on a mountain, but just step out of the zone of your day-to-day life, and the gift will come back to you. And do it for a reason and a cause.
And the response from everybody, how's that been?
Oh, it's been amazing.
I mean, when you arrived and you had everyone there waiting for you.
Always makes me emotional. It was a big day.
I can imagine.
Big day and big moment.
Wow.
So.
And for you, Kim, when she finally arrived, your sister, who the last time you saw, you gave her a big hug at base camp and you were very, very worried. And when you saw her at the airport?
Sure. I think when she finally walked through those doors, I was the first person to pounce on her, and I stuck to you like super glue. She wasn't even allowed to go to the bathroom on her own for the rest of the day. No, it was a wonderful, wonderful moment, and we were just also happy for her for the achievement, you know, and so many lives have been touched, you know, from the charity point of view, and it's an ongoing thing, so it's just been such a wonderful experience for everyone really to get involved. You know, the money raised, everything's amazing.
I had Steve Bidoff in the studio not so long ago talking about raising boys, raising girls, and the differences, and he talks about the importance of having a mentor in life. And I think that's really lacking. I mean, I've discussed it with a whole lot of moms, and we've all turned around and said, but where do you get the mentors from? Like, where are they? Who are they? I mean, how do you find a mentor? Do you see yourself as a mentor? I mean, you've spoken about going and speaking to corporates and to school children as well, and your you know, this community that you're starting and that they're there already. But do you realize that you can be so pivotal in guiding young people's lives, just in terms of what you've overcome and what you've done? And do you see it as a responsibility?
You know, Nikki, when I've done talks and I've had people come to me afterwards or send me an email and message saying, I've made this decision to do something because you inspired me. Thank you very much. And I think when sharing my story about climbing Everest and the hardships and the challenges and all those things, and realizing that I don't know who I'm speaking to in the audience, but maybe it's just changing somebody's life today, in this moment, in this time. That is so awesome and that's so amazing. And yeah, that is wonderful, wonderful to know.
And once again, did you know that you would be doing
No,
that? So
not
there's
at all,
so many
not at
things
all,
that have come out
absolutely.
of you.
Big gift.
With
Very
a
big gift.
having such a big dream, even when people said no, you know, persevering
Yeah.
and moving into a whole different realm in
Yeah.
your life. Well, Lee, you've inspired me.
Thank you, Nikki.
And I am sure that you have inspired so many of our listeners, because nothing is impossible.
No,
And
not
we've
at
just
all.
got to set our minds to something, whatever it is. We all have our own Everests to climb.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. It has been a true
pleasure.
privilege having you in the
It's been
studio.
awesome to be here.
And
Thank
Kim, thank you. It's so lovely meeting the sister, a supportive role, but such an important role. It's been great. I'd
Thank
love
you.
to meet the whole family.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you. So, and thank you. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for listening. And if you have had to tune out for a moment or two, we will be podcasting the show. Visit the website www.conversationswithniki, Niki spelled Niki.co.za. Also, I'll be putting it on my Facebook page, and we'll be tweeting the interview as well. So take care. Look after yourself. I look forward to spending more time with you the same time next week. From me, Niki Seberini. Goodbye.
Hi, my name is Esvia Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
StudyApps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by StudyApps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.